this out of here so I can get it close to my face. I'm Meg Pawkin. I'm the vice president of our local Geauga League of Women Voters. Sadly, our president's family has COVID, so she's home. We have some other leadership folks who would normally be here who are also dealing with COVID issues at home. So those of us who are the mighty remaining force is here to manage the event. I want to thank everyone. You know, our role in this is to be party neutral and to present an educational forum for voters so that you can make informed decisions. I want to thank our West G School District for permitting us the use of their space, providing this nice room, and for welcoming us so warmly into their facility. So thank you, Mr. Kish, and we appreciate you very much. I also want to thank GTV, who's here to broadcast live stream and also to videotape for us to use on our website. So once this event is completed, please let friends know who weren't able to be here tonight that the video will be available on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. There will probably be a link on our website, and we'll share it in social media. So you'll be able to watch it at a later date if you weren't able to be here tonight. I want to thank the Chagrin Valley Times. We have gotten tremendous support from them in terms of assisting us with the printing and distribution of our print voter guide. So many people in the county rely on that print voter guide in order to make educated decisions, again, about voting choices. And it is not without expense that they do that. And they graciously do that for us free of charge. And so I really want to say thank you to them. I want to thank the Geauga County Public Library. They have provided meeting space for us, event space for us, resources for us in order to inform voters in the county. And our library system is an excellent one, as all of you know, and I really want to say thank you to them. And finally, I want to thank our league volunteers. You know, we've all got families and work and all those things, and we volunteer to do this work because we all feel so strongly about the integrity of our democracy and about informing voters and educating voters and making sure that people are able to vote and can do so with full information. So I want to say a big thank you to our volunteers. I think I already said what's on this slide, so I'll skip right past that. We will have a recording available for folks afterwards on our YouTube channel. I'm going to go over our ground rules. If some of you haven't been here before, you might not be aware of the way that we operate. So this is a forum. It's not a debate. It's not a rally. The idea is that the public may pose questions and candidates answer. So we don't distinguish between who's an incumbent and who's a challenger. We treat everyone the same. We don't favor on party. We go in alphabetical order. That's how we do it. We do not permit surrogates to speak on behalf of candidates. We've had our question portal open for a couple of weeks now, and I think 15 or so questions were received, compiled, and organized by subject matter. I want to go over just a little bit about our question screening process. Because this is an informative and educational event, we screen our questions for topics that are relevant to the office being sought. So that colors how questions are proposed. We also look for questions that are unfair, are inflammatory, because what we're seeking is education. During this event, note cards for question submission can be brought to our screener table up until the beginning of the candidates' presentations for that particular race. So we are hearing from our District 99 Ohio House folks, and we're hearing from our 11th District Court of Appeals folks. So up until those candidates begin their presentations, you may submit questions for those races. I would encourage you not to hold your questions until the end, because you won't have a chance to ask them. We ask the questions during the presentation time for each candidate and each race. As I said, we present in alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to do an initial presentation. They've been asked to present on their own positions. The moderator, me, will select and present the questions to the candidates. They will have 90 seconds to respond with a 15-second warning. We have a timer in the front row who will be holding up her timing device so they can see. Our time limits are strictly enforced because we want to be able to cover as many questions as possible. We're going to begin tonight with Eugene Lucci and Thomas Wright, who are judges for the 11th District Court of Appeals. But before we begin with that, I'm reminded that we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So I ask everyone to stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Our candidate forum will now begin. I have been asked by GTV that each of you stand when you speak because it's easier for them to film you. So I would ask that you do that. We'll begin with Mr. Lucci with your 3-minute opening statement. You will need to turn on your microphone.
Good evening. Thanks, League of Women Voters, for holding this forum. It's very important for civic education in the judicial races because judges are so limited on what we can say. Find that legislative candidates can promise you this and that and what they'll do in office. We can't give you any promises as to any outcome because if we did, we'd be disqualified from that. I'm running for the Court of Appeals for the 11th District, which covers all of Northeast Ohio, Lake, Geauga, Portage, Ashtabula, and Trumbull counties. The 11th District is the intermediate appellate court right below the Supreme Court, right above the Court of Common Pleas, and it hears appeals coming from the trial courts in those 5 counties. And by the way, our 5 judges on the court, they sit in 3-judge randomly selected panels. 2 out of the 3 judges, the majority, have to make the decision. I'm a common pleas judge in Lake County. I have been a common pleas judge for 22 years. I'm a retired police officer. My entire legal career spans 47 years as police officer, trial attorney, and judge. I am endorsed by the Lake County Bar Association as highly recommended. They are the folks that know me the best. They're the ones that practice in my court every day. And I have always, for the last 22 years, received the highest endorsement from them. This particular election cycle, I received the highest out of all the candidates, including those on the Supreme Court. I'm also endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, covering all of Northeast Ohio. Born and raised in Youngstown, went to Cardinal Mooney High School, went to Case Western Reserve for my undergrad. I have pursued, after my Juris Doctor degree, advanced degrees in judiciary in an effort to expand my abilities and enhance my abilities and enhance the law. I have a science technology certification out of the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., where I attended a three-year-long course, and basically everything comes to court sooner or later. And one of the trial judges separate fact from fiction, good science from bad science. And I've been doing that in deciding 28,000 cases. I've issued 1,200 plus search warrants. I've tried 400 or so jury trials, and I handle all up to death penalty cases and serious felonies, as well as the most serious civil cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Mr. Wright, would you like to provide us with your opening statement?
Thank you to the League for putting this together. I am Judge Tom Wright. I've been your appellate judge for the last 12 years. I'm going to quickly go through my background with you because 3 minutes goes quick. I'll start with law school. I graduated from the University of Toledo Law School with honors, was a technical editor on the Law Review, and was chosen as one of 4 third-year law students to serve as a teaching assistant for the incoming first-year students. That background and those credentials gave me the opportunity to seek a judicial clerkship. My very first job in the law was as a clerk for Judge Ford on the 11th District Court of Appeals, where I now serve as a judge. The greatest experience I've had in my career thus far. I independently reviewed the briefs of counsel, did research, and wrote draft opinions for the court. Now, I primarily worked with Judge Ford, but I also worked with 3 other judges on that court, and I learned the art of judging early on. After serving my clerkship, I went into private practice, where my practice consisted about 95% of trial law. So I tried probably 40 jury trials in various areas of law. I've tried probate cases, divorce cases, personal injury, medical malpractice, construction law cases, just to name a few. After 10 years into practice, my peers at the Mahoning County Bar Association named me Lawyer of the Year for performing outstanding legal work. And that brings you up to 2010, when I first ran for the Court of Appeals. I ran against Judge Lucci then and won. I have served now 2 terms. In my re-election bids, the lawyers all weigh in on how the judges are doing. I'll bet most of you folks haven't read any of my thousands of opinions out there. And so I always say you have to trust the lawyers. So in 2016, Lake County Bar Association, highly recommended, 96% favorable. I had the highest rating in 2016 out of Lake. I was highly recommended out of Portage. I was 92% favorable out of Geauga County, and I was the preferred candidate out of Trumbull County. This election cycle, again, I'm highly recommended out of Lake County. I'm highly recommended out of Portage. In Trumbull County, 9 out of 10 lawyers prefer me over my opponent. That's the way they do their polls. And just hot off the presses, I think this morning, Geauga County released their results, and of the 8 judges who are running in contested elections, I'm the most highly recommended of all of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen. The first question we have that was received from our portal: what is unique or special about your experience, professionally or personally, that makes you the best choice for judge of the 11th District Court of Appeals? And I'll start with Mr. Wright. Yes, please.
What do I get, a minute and a half on this one? Okay. I'd say everything about my background. Starting off clerking for an appellate court and now serving as the presiding judge, that's really the reason I got here. Private practice, my trial work in various areas of law. I was a general practitioner and would try pretty much any case, anywhere, anytime, any subject. That rounds out and helps immensely with what we do at the Court of Appeals, because we are a general jurisdiction court. We hear probate cases, we hear juvenile cases, excuse me, divorce cases, you name it. I think the only thing we don't hear on a direct appeal is a death penalty case. That goes straight to the Supreme Court now. Used to go to the Court of Appeals. I worked on a death penalty case when I was there before. Now, 12 years on the appellate court. I've had the opportunity to serve on my court. I've been appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to sit on 5 other appellate courts and the Supreme Court of Ohio. So I've sat on more than half of the appellate courts in this state now. Again, this is for appellate court judge. I have 15 years of experience doing appellate court work, 17 years as a trial lawyer, and I just don't think you can get much better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Lucci, what is unique or special about your experience, professionally or personally, that makes you the best choice for judge of the 11th District Court of Appeals?
Well, real life experience and professional diversity. The main work of the Court of Appeals comes down to reviewing what common pleas trial judges do. That's where most of the appeals come from, the common pleas court. And in the common pleas court, what we mostly do is review what police officers do and square that up with procedure and the Constitution. I have real-world experience in both of those. Having been a police officer, retired as a police officer, I've seen people at their worst. I've seen law in action on the street. I've had to make split-second decisions. Do I arrest this person? Do I not? Do I search? Do I not? Do I shoot? Do I not? As a trial court judge, I've had to make those split-second decisions in trial. Is this evidence admissible or is it not? So with my breadth of experience in the community, I've been president of Leadership Lake County, the Bar Association, the AIDS Task Force, Rotary Club. With the education that I have, especially trained in science matters, science and technology, handling death penalty cases, handling all of these cases, that gives me the breadth of experience that we need on that court. Thank you.
Thank you both. Mr. Lucci, I'll start with you this time. What process do you believe should be used when judges of the Court of Appeals have a disagreement among themselves relating to cases before them?
Well, the process is that, first off, each of them separately decides what they think the law is, how the error should be corrected, or if it is an error, or whether it's harmless error, and then talk it out with the other judges. They do have to arrive at a consensus on the actual outcome. As I mentioned earlier, it takes 2 out of 3 to make the decision. So it's a matter of sound research and sound analysis, and somebody has to convince somebody else that as to the outcome of the case. As a trial court judge, I always argue with myself and I always win. But in the Court of Appeals, you do have to get one other judge to see things your way as a matter of law, whether there's error or not.
Mr. Wright.
Actually, you don't have to get somebody to agree with you. Every judge is entitled to have their own opinion. And sometimes there are 3 different opinions that come out of a court. And sometimes there is no consensus. Very rare. But having done this for 12 years and having served for 3 years as a clerk, I can tell you exactly how it happens. We all independently research. We'll write memos to each other. But we knock on each other's doors and we sit down with each other and we explain what our position is. And they explain what their position is. And I say judging, when you're arguing with another judge, when you're arguing with another lawyer, no matter what, it's a tennis match. And if I hit the ball over the net and you can't return it, it's time for you to agree with me. If it bounces twice on your side of the net, it's time for you to agree with me. If it bounces twice on my side of the net, it's time for me to agree with them. And, I work with Judge Mary Jane Trapp, who's here today. I work with Judge Eklund, Judge Lynch, Judge Rice, and every one of them is approachable. We will conference a case immediately afterward, take a tentative vote of where we are. We write bench briefs, so we have a good idea of what the case is and where our reasoning is going before we start oral argument, and sometimes that changes with oral argument. So, thank you.
Mr. Wright, I'll start with you on this one. How much, if at all, should judges weigh evolving public opinion regarding issues that arise in the cases before them? How much, if at all, should judges weigh evolving public opinion regarding issues that arise in the cases before them?
It depends on if the evolving opinion is the proper legal conclusion or not. But I think I get the gist of your question. Judges can't be swayed by public opinion. It does not matter. I mean, we are there to enforce rights, statutory and constitutional. And I think one of the most important things we do, and one of the most important things the Constitution does, is protects minorities. Minority rights. If you are one person in this country out of 330 million and all the others are against you, if you have a constitutional right that protects you, I will enforce it. And I will not be swayed by public opinion. I never have, and I never will. So my quick question or answer to that is not at all. I mean, public opinion should not sway. And sometimes you do, as a judge, have to sit tall in the saddle and take a lot of shots from the public who don't understand the legal issues as well. But that goes with the territory.
Thank you. Mr. Lucci, how much, if at all, should judges weigh evolving public opinion regarding issues that arise in the cases before them?
Not at all. The Constitution is our fundamental law. The statutes that are enacted according to the Constitution, pursuant to the Constitution, are the law of the land. If public opinion goes against the Constitution or against the statutory laws, there are ways to change that. There are mechanisms to change statutes. You just talk to your legislator. There's a way to change the Constitution. But as Judge Wright mentioned, if you're in the minority, you are protected by the law. At one point, slavery was the evolving public opinion. And everybody knows that's wrong. So, the public opinion changes from time to time. It blows with the wind. When I first took the bench, my very first trial was a high-profile trial. It was a bench trial, and both the Plain Dealer and the News Herald told me in editorials in the middle of the trial how to rule on the case. And that wasn't the way that the case came out. I ruled the opposite of them. And I had to stand up to the criticism and take the arrows. That's just the way it goes. It was the right decision to make. Then they both wrote editorials after that I did make the right decision. So there's an instance where public opinion changed because I explained my ruling. And that's part of judicial process, explaining your rulings.
Thank you. I'll begin with you this time, Mr. Lucci. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night thinking about a case and wishing you'd handled something differently? If so, please describe one such situation.
Give it to me one more time, the second part of it. I know the wake up in the middle of the night part.
If so, please describe one such situation.
Well, I've been awakened many times in the middle of the night. As I said, I've issued about 1,200 to maybe 1,500 search warrants. A lot of these do come at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not sure I have ever woken up in a cold sweat. However, I always think twice about my criminal sentences. I've sentenced about 8,000 felons, and you always want to do the right thing. You don't want to be overly harsh, but you don't want to be demeaning to the damage that was done and the nature of the crime. So particularly early on, and this is part of the learning curve. After 22 years, hopefully I've learned how to do this, but early on, you wonder, well, did I go overboard on this, or did I not give this person enough prison time? So that's the type of struggles that a trial judge goes through. I can't say that I've ever woken up in a cold sweat over a decision that I've made. I'm very thoughtful on my decisions. I do my research. I write my decision. I think about it tremendously, and wherever the chips fall, they fall.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, have you ever woken up in the middle of the night thinking about a case, wishing you'd handled something differently? If so, please describe one such situation.
Well, that happened a lot more often when I was a trial lawyer than it does as a judge. I can't say that I wake up in the middle of the night, but I do think about my opinions frequently, and there are times when you write something in an opinion that you realize you could have been more precise maybe with your language, so you need to clarify it in a future opinion. I can't think of any time offhand that I've thought that I've necessarily gotten the opinion wrong after I've issued it. But I also take my time and am thoughtful. Sometimes I'll get an opinion written, and I say it's like putting it in the slow cooker. I'll set it off on the side of my desk, and sometimes I have better thoughts as I'm driving in my car thinking about it than I do when I'm in my chambers. The best advice I got from a judge when I first started was, he said, "You're going to get something wrong, and it's going to come back to bite you one day." And he said, "If it does, just say it. Just fall on your sword and get it fixed." Fortunately, in my 12 years, that hasn't happened yet, but we have clarified earlier opinions with later opinions.
Thank you. All right. And I'll begin with you this time, Mr. Wright. Please describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended people, and explain how you handled it.
A controversial opinion where I've angered somebody. Are you talking about as a judge, or?
It's not limited to judicial experience, no.
See, I don't know. I generally don't anger people. I might annoy them a little bit.
How about
sometimes.
offended?
I'm persistent. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I think it's just part of life. I mean, there's frictions, but sometimes on the court, we'll get into some. I don't want to say heated. We're not yelling at each other, but it's intense. Where we're disagreeing with each other, and I can't see it their way. They can't see it mine. And usually, when that happens, I find it best to just step back, diffuse the situation. Set it for another day. And I just recently can tell you with Judge Eklund, he kept explaining a concept to me that we just kept talking past each other. Now, it wasn't a situation where either one of us was heated with each other, and I just stepped back from it. And about a day later, everything he was saying to me crystallized. I was like, oh, now I get what you were saying. And he was right. So, I think you just have to always be willing to question who you're disagreeing with and continually question yourself, too.
Thank you. Mr. Lucci, would you please describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended people and explain how you handled it?
Only one.
Just one.
As a trial judge, I'm on the front line. I've decided 28,000 cases, and I can tell you, judging from death threats I've had from all over the country, most recent one just a couple of weeks ago, somebody called for my assassination. I have irritated people in the country. I also get fan mail, good fan mail. But I can tell you, I decided who owns the beach of Lake Erie. Not in Lake County, but in all of Ohio, from Michigan to Pennsylvania. And the Supreme Courts of Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota ruled that it belonged to the state, that it was owned by the state for the benefit of the people, all the way up to the high water mark. So the state claimed all of that, and that's what the Supreme Courts of those states ruled. I ruled that it's down to the water line, wherever the water line is when it's not moving, consistent with Ohio law. And I let the environmental groups in, the Ohio Environmental Council, the National Wildlife Federation, and I got their fan mail saying that I'm against the ecosystem. Well, I was upheld by our Court of Appeals and by the Supreme Court, every judge unanimous. But I did get a lot of fan mail, and I took the heat. That's what happens.
Thank you. Thank you both for your eloquent answers to our questions and for participating in our voter forum. Next, we're going to hear from Amy Martin Dorenzio, who is the Associate Director of the Geauga County Board of Mental Health and Recovery Services, and she's going to address us about Geauga County Issue 3.
Would help if I turned it on, right? Thank you and good evening. My name is Amy Martin Dorenzio, and I'm the Associate Director of the Geauga County Board of Mental Health and Recovery Services. Thank you so much for giving your time and attention this evening. We're here to talk to you about Issue 3. This is a renewal levy that will not cost the taxpayers any additional dollars, but one in which every penny of this levy is used to provide direct services to Geauga County residents in the community for mental health services. These services that the levy pays for are critical mental health services to our community. The levy provides funding for over 90 programs, providing cradle-to-grave behavioral health services and crisis services to those in the community who need it most. Emergency hotlines, foster care mentorship programs, clinical services, veteran services, elder care, and crisis residential treatment services for adults and children are just some of the many services and programs that are needed by this levy in order to continue and to fund. Services that are currently providing help and support to thousands of citizens in Geauga County are relying on this levy to be renewed and continue. The pandemic has impacted all of us. This is especially true for those with severe and persistent mental illness. With the number of people who are in need of these types of mental health services ever increasing, this levy is needed in our community more than ever. In response, we are providing the community with more services than we have ever provided before. And our agencies are receiving more funding now than ever before. This levy is needed in order to ensure that we can continue to meet those needs and to make sure that those services are accessible to everyone in Geauga County. On Election Day, please vote for Issue 3 to renew this levy and allow us to keep providing critical mental health services and supports to the children, adults, and elderly in our community who desperately need it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. No questions. Next, I'd like to welcome to the front Sarah Fowler Arthur and Kathy Zappitello, who are candidates for Ohio's 99th District of Representative. Ms. Arthur, I don't know if you had heard when we began, it's preferable for GTV if you stand when delivering your answers. So if you'd like to begin with your 3-minute introductory, you may.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Fowler Arthur, your state representative and formerly 8-year member of the State Board of Education representing Geauga County. Thank you for hosting the event and for all of you coming and taking the time to hear our comments this evening. Due to redistricting, I will have the majority of Geauga County in the district again. It's been a pleasure to serve Chardon and the surrounding areas over the past 2 years. As many of you may know from previous times, I grew up in agriculture and have had the privilege of serving on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, as well as the Primary and Secondary Education Committee, having come off the State Board of Education. And last year, I was privileged to buy a farm with my husband, Isaac Arthur, who's a physicist and an Army veteran, and we grow blueberries and honeybees. So we're getting involved in those agricultural pursuits that I actually found you have a lot of beekeepers in Geauga County at John's Nursery event last week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. I also co-produce the internationally acclaimed show Futurism with my husband, Isaac Arthur, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was 11. I'm a small business owner and have also enjoyed working on several bills in the House regarding business and the economy. We were able to cut taxes by 3% in Ohio. Unfortunately, inflation is going to eat up most of that, but we did our part here in Ohio, and we also have worked on a number of overregulation issues and tried to streamline our occupational licensure to be on parity with surrounding states to ensure that we are affordable and effective when it comes to licensing people everywhere from funeral directors to optometrists and dental hygienists. We make sure that the state boards are charging an appropriate amount and requiring an appropriate amount of continuing education credit. I've also been very pleased to help expand our infrastructure. We voted to expand last mile projects with broadband in the last year, and we've actually seen 2 of those come to completion since my time in office in Chardon and just last week in Roaming Shores. And we are looking forward to more of those because I think the pandemic highlighted for all of us the need for improved infrastructure in the 21st century. As you may also know, education continues to be a big priority for me. I believe strongly in parental rights, local control of our schools, and ensuring that the taxpayer dollars are respected and directed toward academic instruction. Finally, I would just like to also point out that I've been endorsed by a number of great organizations. I'm sorry, are you the timekeeper?
Yes.
I apologize.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Ms. Zappitello, your 3-minute introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, too. I really appreciate it. My name is Kathy Zappitello, and I'm running to be your next state rep for the 99th District of Ohio. I am currently the Executive Director of the Conneaut Public Library in Conneaut, Ohio, and I am current board member, past president for ARSL, the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. This is a national organization where we help those working in small libraries in little communities all across the United States with advocacy, partnerships, grants, and support. I'm a proud graduate of Kent State Ashtabula campus, and I am also a teacher. So I have taught dance all of my adult life to children ages 3 to 18 from Conneaut to Chardon. So I'm a proud Rotarian, and I'm also involved with so many other boards locally, state, and nationally. And all of that can be found and detailed on my campaign website, zappitelloforohio.com. So I have been endorsed as well, and my endorsements are the Matriots of Ohio, the Teamsters Ohio Drive, Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, Pro-Choice Ohio, and both the Ashtabula and the Ohio AFL-CIO. I'm very proud of those. So I'm running for accountability, transparency. As a library director, I'm very familiar of both of those things, and it's something I strive to do. But what's important is infrastructure. And you'll hear this evening, hopefully, and certainly check out my website. I have been very involved with infrastructure in Northeast Ohio. And of course, we know that brings economic development. That's a main component of why I'm running. And finally, I really feel this is about communication. So as a library director and as a professional, I am a communication professional. And so that is something that we need as a spokesperson. That representative position is your spokesperson. This person carries your voice forward and represents you, and it should be someone that you feel can do that with pride. So I look forward to you voting for me on November 8th. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Ms. Zappitello, I'll start with you. What is your position on banning books in public or school libraries? Are there other ways to address concerns besides banning a book entirely?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So no, I'm against banning books. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the tenet of what I do as vocation. And so with that, each library, nationally and in the state of Ohio, we have policies that guide what we do. So as librarians and a library professional, what we do is we stand behind our policies. So that is what we support. So there are mechanisms in place to challenge a book, to have conversations about really tough things, and to decide as an organization if that's something that would be removed from the collection. And I can tell you, as a library director for 20 years, it has only happened once, and we did not remove the book. Thank you.
Ms. Arthur, what is your position on banning books in public or school libraries, and are there other ways to address concerns besides banning a book entirely?
Thank you. It is unfortunate that my media and the opponent continue to say that I want to ban books. I never have wanted to ban books. And I think that this is an example of how liberal terminology has been changing definitions of words. In my mind, banning a book means you're not allowed to buy it, or sell it, or have it, or own it. And under the definition that is being used, it apparently means not allowing taxpayers or not forcing taxpayers to buy textbooks and requiring teachers to promote an anti-American ideology in the classroom. This is a new definition similar to inflation, recession, boys and girls bathrooms. And I think that this is a really big concern. So it's important to have a well-rounded viewpoint of history. It is important for us to be able to learn from a variety of viewpoints, and I think that we have the local school board parents in the best position to make sure that children and local board are receiving that education. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question, and that is, what is your position on removing books from a public or school library based on parent concerns, and are there other ways to address such concerns? And I'll let you answer first, Ms. Arthur, and then I'll come to Ms. Zappitello.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes,
for
same
clarifying
time.
that. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that question. And there are a number of ways, as was already mentioned, for people to have redress of grievances. And it's usually through the local school board. It is also through the State Board of Education if there's a pervasive problem in the school. And then in the library board, you have the opportunity to go to the Board of Trustees or the Board of Directors, depending on how it's set up. And you also have the opportunity to vote. So I know that is a very important one because you're all here, and I expect that you all are voting. And so you can make a difference in a variety of ways, but ultimately, whether or not a child is reading a book, which seems to be the question being asked, should be up to the parents and the teacher and the classroom and the school board on whether or not it's age-appropriate material.
Thank you. Ms. Zappitello.
So there are mechanisms in place, but again, every parent has a decision what their child can read. And you can remove a book from a school library, but the access still remains. And how I would like to answer this question is to talk about the statistics of what is being banned. And what's important to know, and all of these statistics can be found, they're linked on my Zappitello4ohio.com in an article. But what's concerning about what's going on with banned books is what's being banned. And overwhelming majority says it's from black and brown authors with black and brown subject matter. And then after that, it's LGBTQ+. So that's concerning, that we live in a world of fear, that we're just so afraid of the other, and we're so afraid of the unknown. It must be really hard to go through life so scared, afraid of the past, afraid of the future. There's a better way forward, and it's through communication. And sometimes that is having tough conversations about what we're seeing in a book. But children need to see themselves represented as well. And we're open to having those tough conversations. But our schools are professionally run, and so are our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Arthur, I'll start with you on this one. Please share if you have met with the 3 city managers in Ashtabula County in person or virtually to hear about how you can represent them and advocate for them at the state level and learn about their requests for assistance.
Thank you. I think that is an interesting question because I've met not only with the city managers, but also the township trustees, the city councils, not only in Ashtabula County, but also in Geauga County. We were very pleased to be able to obtain funding, starting with Conneaut. The city manager there asked for funding for a dredging project. We have 2 deep water ports in Ashtabula County. They are in Ashtabula and Conneaut Harbor. And we were able to obtain funding through the capital budget to dredge both of those and keep ore and other important infrastructure materials flowing through that port to Pittsburgh. We also had a request from Ashtabula City for the homeless population, and we have a large number of people there that we are trying to get housing for, and I was able to obtain appropriation in the capital budget for that as well. I'm assuming that the 3rd city manager that they mean would be for Geneva, but we also met with Mr. Varquette in Geneva and had a conversation about the road project that is coming up there, and also Geneva on the Lake, and we were able to obtain funding for a new handicap accessible ramp for the park as well as the town. So we've met with all of them. I was grateful to be able to help obtain funding in this most recent budget for all of them, and look forward to being able to continue that forward as well. Thank you.
Ms. Zappitello, have you met with the 3 city managers in Ashtabula County in person or virtually to hear about how you can represent them and advocate for them at the state level and to learn about their requests for assistance?
Absolutely, I have, because that's about building relationships. And what's interesting about that question is that I know them all already. And as a librarian and as someone that has been involved with the Conneaut Foundation, which is involved with economic development, of course, Rotary, I'm on the Community Counseling Center board for Ashtabula County. So yes, I have met with all of our city managers and more, actually. But what's interesting about the dredge project is that there was not a letter of support that was given from our state rep. And so, to the best of my knowledge, that conversation didn't take place. But thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Zappitello, I'll start with you for this one. Can you summarize House Bill 563 in your own words?
Yeah, so 563, I think you guys might know it as the Airbnb bill. Yeah. So it's supposed to help tourism, right? It's supposed to, we'll have more Airbnbs, and it's lifting restrictions. What concerns me about 563 is that it takes away our local zoning. And that's where the reflection of who we are as a community shines through. If we take away that local zoning control, then all of a sudden we have an unbalance in our community. And so if we don't have, our short-term rentals in the areas that we want, or other community reasons why we have, different festivals and things, and you have other things going on that the state doesn't always isn't keen on, right, or doesn't understand. So I think it's important that we have local control. The other thing about that bill is short-term rentals don't pay the bed tax. And so if we have more of those, of course, they're not paying in to the machine that helps market the area for tourism. So that's a concern of mine as well. Thank you.
Ms. Arthur, can you summarize House Bill 563 in your own words?
Thank you. Yes, I can, because I am the joint sponsor of the legislation, and this is a private property rights bill. We have a number of places across the country that have begun to ban individuals from using their home as a short-term rental. And we believe you have a constitutional right to own private property and to use that private property in a legal way to earn money. And so this bill says that no local or state government can ban someone from using their home as a short-term rental. However, it has to be in compliance with the state law. It preserves zoning because we specifically say that local government is responsible for noise ordinances, regulation, they can license, they can choose to tax. State law actually allows all short-term rentals to be taxed that are 5 bedrooms or higher. If it's lower than 5 bedrooms, it is considered that you might be using it as a cottage industry in a similar way to baking out of your home or doing any other business at home to earn a living would be. Additionally, local governments retain jurisdiction over health and safety issues. We ensure that they have the ability to regulate that, and I would be happy to share more. My website, electsarahfowler.com, links directly to the bill, and I welcome your questions.
So we had a follow-up question to this one also, and I'll ask each of you, starting with Ms. Zappitello, do you own any short-term rentals or properties that could be used as short-term rentals?
No, I do not. And since I still have time, I think it's important to mention about 563 is that, again, if your representative is your voice for the 99 has said they didn't want this. So it just begs the question of why. When we have our Ohio, even Board of Tourism saying no, our local tourism saying no, our municipalities, our townships saying no, that concerns me. That concerns me as a constituent myself. Thank you.
Ms. Arthur, do you own any short-term rentals or properties that could be used as short-term rentals?
Thank you for the question, and I've been very open since sponsoring the bill that yes, I've had the privilege to own a long-term rental and a short-term rental since getting married, and it has been an eye-opening experience. I feel this has helped me to be able to understand how to craft the legislation, a number of letters of support from constituents in the district who also own short-term rentals or long-term rentals, and we would say that they should be regulated in a similar fashion. Additionally, I think that it's important to note that we have the Ohio Realtors Association, the hotel and lodging industry supporting the bill because they see this as a plus, not only for economic development in a specific area, but also because it enhances tourism, it enhances economic development, and it provides us with opportunities for a number of people to earn a living who might not otherwise be able to. Really quickly, there was a couple that bought a short-term rental house in Columbus, and they shared with us that they were able to pay off their home while renting out part of it. And another lady shared with me that she had been widowed and wanted to be able to still remain home with her young children, and she was able to rent out part of her house and use the income to provide her with a living. So there's a number of reasons that private property rights should continue to be respected, and that is what House Bill 563 does.
Thank you. Ms. Arthur, we'll start with you on this one. What is your definition of divisive concepts as referenced in House Bill 327 and 616?
Thank you. I can speak to 327. I cannot speak to 616 specifically because I'm not sponsoring that bill, and I don't know what changes have taken place. But it is important to know that the legislative process starts off with a bill. And so 327 started out with a bill trying to define divisive concepts. And it has morphed over time as we received input from the public, and we had interested party meetings, proponent and opponent testimony, so that that term is no longer being used in the bill. And we are being very careful to try to specifically help people understand that this bill is about protecting the civil rights of every child in every school and the civil rights of every employee in public schools, state and local government entities, and universities. And we feel that to do that, taxpayer dollars need to be protected from being used to promote racist and anti-American ideologies. This does not mean that you can't talk about them. We encourage talking about them. It means that you cannot only hear that side of the story, and that you need to have well-rounded perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zappitello, what's your definition of divisive concepts as referenced in House Bill 327 and 616?
Yes, there's been revisions to that, but it is known as the divisive concept bill. And by definition, divisive concept means quite simply difficult conversation. That's how it's defined. And so what the bill is saying to you is that difficult conversations need to stop. And guess what? I can speak to 616. You guys can too. All of this is online. So that's the sister bill, right? That is the sister bill to 327. 327 has municipalities, political subdivisions, schools, universities. And whereas 616 is schools. So again, not being able to have difficult conversations. That's what's concerning. The interesting thing about House Bill 616 is that it does list one book by name, and it is the 1619 Project. And I don't know if you've read the 1619 Project. I have. And that has 54 pages of citations in it. Not 54 citations, 54 pages of citations. Why would that be banned? Thank you.
So there was a follow-up question with this, and that was, and again, I'll start with you, Ms. Arthur. Do you believe that Ohio schools should teach that there are two neutral and legitimate sides to, quote, divisive concepts? You had mentioned in your answer that you thought a well-rounded presentation would be best. So I'm going to use the slavery example and ask, how should schools teach neutral information about that?
Thank you for the question. I think this goes back to the legislative process. We have an original draft of the bill. We received commentary on it. One of our revisions included a request from a superintendent that we include multiple sides, and the way that it got drafted was two sides. In further revisions of that draft, that has been removed to say multiple perspectives, because in no way do we believe that there's only two sides to every issue, or that they should be given equal weight or value. And so obviously, we are still operating from a perspective of what Americans hold to be true and good and right. And that is the conscience that the local board is going to promote in their school and say, this is what we expect you to be teaching. And so the idea that there's only two sides or that they have to be equally held as correct is not accurate, but it did come about as a part of drafting the bill, and we had discussions on that and decided that that was no longer appropriate language to include. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zappitello, how do you believe schools should approach teaching a divisive topic like slavery and present neutral or legitimate sides to that? I'm sorry, that wasn't very articulate.
No, will you rephrase that, please?
Yes, I will. The follow-up question related to, do you believe that Ohio schools should teach that there are two neutral and legitimate, and I used Ms. Arthur's phrasing of well-rounded sides to divisive concepts like slavery?
No, sometimes there's one side of a story. Sometimes there's right, and sometimes it's wrong. And history has shown us that. And I'm just going to cut to the chase here. We're known nationally as teaching both sides of the Holocaust bill. This is how we're known nationally. That's embarrassing. That's hard. That's a tough thing for me to it's secondhand shame. It's horrible. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we had a question about school funding. And I believe I started with Ms. Arthur last time, so I'll start with you, Ms. Zappitello. What changes, if any, would you like to see in the funding of Ohio schools?
Well, we're still working on Ohio funding, right? And so, again, John Patterson's also a good friend of mine, and we've had many conversations about this. And it's an evolving process, right? Are we really fair and equitable yet in our funding? No. I think that, I remember being in high school and my history teacher and my government teacher would always talk about school funding. And so it's been a problem for a very, very long time. And I don't know how we're going to get there, but I would like to be at the helm. Thank you.
Ms. Arthur, what changes, if any, would you like to see in the funding of Ohio schools?
Thank you. I was privileged to be able to be in the House when we voted to approve House Bill 1, dealing with school funding last year. And House Bill 1 reduces dependence on local property tax, which is something that I've advocated for since my first election as a State Board of Education member, because it disproportionately hurts seniors and members of the community who have a large amount of property, such as farmers. And so I believe the new funding formula is good. It focuses on the services that schools are offering students, and it funds them on a per pupil basis. What we need to do going forward is ensure that we can fully fund the formula. This year, it was only funded to about a third, and I'm looking forward to future budgets in the hope that we will be able to fully fund that and see the overarching outcome of being able to follow through on the commitment that we've made with the new formula. Previously, the last formula, there was only 2 school districts that were still on the formula, and so it was not working, it was broken, and we have replaced that system.
Thank you. Our last question from our web input from citizens: how important do you rank improvement in rural broadband service for the residents of this district, and what is your plan for improving it? And I'll go to you first, Ms. Arthur.
Again, a great question. I think that the last 3 years really underscored the importance of modern infrastructure. It is not only important to protect our roads, our bridges, our waterways, and the technology that got us there, but also going forward, broadband is modern infrastructure. And I was very glad to be able to support House Bill 2, which was a priority bill for the legislature this last General Assembly, which supported funding for last mile projects. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we've seen 2 of those projects reach completion just in the last year. One of them was some last mile projects in Chardon, and the other was funding for the Roaming Shores broadband project. And we are expecting them to continue to move east in Ashtabula County and south in Geauga County, and looking forward to seeing additional funding for that in the coming budget as well.
Ms. Zappitello, how important do you see improvement in rural broadband service for the residents of the 99th District, and what is your plan for improving it?
I want to say welcome. I've been waiting for everyone to talk about broadband. I actually, being a librarian and working in a library for the last 20 years, this isn't new to us. This has been a huge disconnect. And I wrote an article, and it's about the digital divide. And of course, we saw this come to the forefront during COVID, right? So, yes, we need broadband in every single corner of the 99th District of Ohio. It needs to be a utility. We need to think about it like that, right? We all know how important it is. And again, when we were in the pandemic, to know that some people did not have access to be able to log on and touch base with the people that they needed to touch base with, or get their assistance checks because of things that they had to do online, or do their homework. But broadband also goes hand in hand with the device, with that other piece of technology that you actually need. And then you have to have the skill set to be able to use all those things together. So I'm glad that we're all talking about this, and I'm glad legislatively we're working towards that. And I'm excited to get in and to be able to continue this, because it's been a lifelong dream of mine being a library director. We've seen it. We've seen the hardships firsthand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Arthur and Ms. Zappitello, for your eloquent and thorough responses to the questions. And thank you, audience, for submitting such good questions. I want to remind you all that our general election is on November 8th, 2022, and the polls will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Early voting begins on October 12th. And if your voter registration hasn't been checked on in a while, you have until October 11th to make sure that that is up to date and that you are registered. Thank you all for being here and for making democracy work.